It sounds like the monarchy will be shifting in a slightly different direction.
I think it's safe to say that change is on my agenda. Change for good.
The palace doors swung open, and the entire hall seemed to freeze in place as if the air itself had been pulled out of the room. No smiles, no hesitation, just a heavy silence settling over everyone watching as Prince William stepped forward with a cold, steady authority that suggested he was no longer waiting for permission from anyone to lead. Behind him, whispers quickly spread across the hall like breaking tension, while Queen Camilla's family stood completely still, their expression shifting from confidence to shock in a matter of seconds. Camera flashes erupted across the space, but William never turned away or reacted, holding his focus as if nothing around him could interrupt his path. The question formed instantly in the minds of those watching. Was this the moment the monarchy quietly drew a new line in history? Inside Buckingham Palace, the atmosphere tightened as the moment fully landed on everyone present. Viewers were directly asked whether William's first appearance as king was a message to the entire royal family, yes or no, inviting reactions and opinions as tension built around what had just unfolded. This was framed as a turning point at Buckingham Palace, the appearance that changed everything, where Prince William was presented in a way the royal household had never experienced before. Away from formal duty, William was sometimes described as relaxed and almost ordinary, sharing jokes, drinking cider, and even riding a scooter with surprising ease. But that image shifted the moment duty called as he moved with precision, ignored photographers, and stepped directly into position without hesitation. Inside palace corridors, longtime courtiers described the environment as controlled and deliberate, as if every movement had already been planned in advance. One senior insider later suggested the room understood instantly that this was not simply a continuation of King Charles's reign, but a quiet change in direction. On the other side of the gathering, the Parker Bowles family, Tom, Laura, and the younger grandchildren, watched in silence as uncertainty began to settle over their long-held sense of access and familiarity. The warmth once extended under King Charles now felt unstable, as privileges and invitations could no longer be assumed under William's firmer approach. Observers summed up the moment in a single word: speechless, not as dramatic shock, but as a quiet realization that the balance had shifted. Even without words, everyone present could feel it. Buckingham Palace itself seemed to realign around a new centre of influence. The balance between tradition and transition appeared to tilt, leaving uncertainty hanging over what the next era under William would actually look like. Every detail carried meaning, from his controlled movements to the absence of ceremonial hesitation and the distance maintained from familiar figures. Nothing about the moment felt accidental, especially when contrasted with his earlier relaxed public behaviour. By the end of the gathering, clarity had replaced confusion, and those present understood that influence within the palace was entering a new phase defined by restraint, calculation, and quiet authority. The Parker Bowles family were left confronting how fragile their position had become after William's first appearance as monarch created a moment of silent shock. But what exactly changed in that moment, and how did Camilla's long-standing influence begin to unravel within the Windsor Circle? Everything they once experienced under King Charles had never been guaranteed by tradition, but granted through personal decision. For years, Camilla was seen as someone who quietly shaped access for her family, including Tom, Laura, and even the grandchildren at private royal gatherings. Tom, known as a food writer, had appeared at official events, while Laura was occasionally seen at private meetings, giving the family rare informal access within royal spaces. A senior source once suggested that when Catherine becomes queen, Camilla would effectively be at her mercy, a claim that was widely dismissed at the time but later resurfaced as tensions shifted. People close to Camilla reportedly felt she was unsettled when King Charles agreed to expand William's authority, a decision that reportedly left her unprepared for the speed of change. When William walked past without acknowledging them, silence turned into calculation as the family reassessed every remaining connection they thought they still had. Within hours, private calls were made, urgent conversations followed, and uncertainty spread as they tried to understand what influence still remained. By the time William delivered his first address, the family reportedly understood they were no longer central figures, but fading presences in a shifting royal structure. No clear path remained to restore what had been lost, and long-held assumptions suddenly felt unstable. Camilla, once seen as a quiet architect of access, was left confronting how quickly influence could disappear when power shifted. Weeks earlier, palace voices had hinted at changes, but few expected them to arrive so suddenly or so visibly. Now every invitation, photograph, and meeting depended entirely on William's discretion, reshaping relationships across the royal circle. What once felt permanent had become uncertain, and the silence left behind carried more weight than anything spoken. The announcement of King Charles's cancer diagnosis in early 2024 quietly shifted the balance inside Buckingham Palace, placing Prince William at the centre of growing responsibility. But how did this change reshape the monarchy? And what truly unfolded as William stepped into roles his father could no longer fully carry? The palace did not wait for a coronation to begin its next chapter. When Buckingham Palace announced King Charles's diagnosis, it immediately altered the flow of duty within the institution. From that point forward, Prince William began taking on responsibility steadily, stepping into engagements his father could no longer manage, and gradually shaping decisions that defined his growing authority. He was not learning the role when he appeared as king. Many inside the palace already saw him living it long before the public did. This transition, described by insiders as carefully prepared over time, made his first appearance feel like confirmation rather than surprise. While this shift unfolded, Queen Camilla maintained a strong presence in royal duties, continuing her long-established influence within palace life. However, her position became more complicated as internal differences emerged between supporters of William's modern approach and those loyal to Charles's traditional decisions. One of the most difficult reported tensions involved discussions around Prince Andrew's residence at Royal Lodge, where William and Catherine were said to have pushed for change. This reported shift allegedly pushed Camilla into a position where she felt increasingly excluded from key decisions taking shape inside the palace. Sources suggest she believed major choices were being made without her involvement, leaving her on the outside of discussions she once expected to be part of. At the same time, disagreement grew over how the York family should be handled publicly, with William favouring a more distant, cautious approach until further clarity on King Charles's health, while Charles himself preferred a more open stance aimed at public reassurance and unity. Behind closed doors, these differences created quiet tension, with Camilla often aligned with Charles but increasingly out of step with William and Catherine's rising influence. By the time William made his first appearance as king, the moment felt less like ceremony and more like confirmation of a role he had already been carrying in practice. Observers noted a heavy silence surrounding Camilla's circle, with her family reportedly watching without comment as the shift in influence became impossible to ignore. Long before the public fully processed what was happening, the monarchy's centre of gravity had already moved toward William's steady control. This gradual transition, shaped by timing, health concerns, and long planning, reportedly deepened private frustration inside the royal household, particularly for Camilla, whose influence appeared increasingly constrained. What once looked like a smooth transition now appeared as a settled shift in authority, with old alliances weakening and new power firmly established under William. A long-running struggle for influence between Catherine, Princess of Wales, and Queen Camilla has been quietly building behind controlled public appearances and royal formality. But beneath the surface, insiders describe a rivalry that the palace can no longer fully contain or soften. William's rise to the throne is closely tied to Catherine's growing visibility, while Camilla's standing appears increasingly challenged by the same shift in internal balance. Palace aides reportedly describe carefully managed distance, with schedules adjusted to reduce direct friction between households. A 2026 state visit reportedly brought these tensions into clearer view, where Catherine's composed presence drew significant attention across multiple engagements. During the state banquet, her tiara choice was widely interpreted within royal circles as more than tradition, but as a subtle signal of future authority. Camilla was reportedly aware of the interpretation, with sources suggesting frustration behind the scenes as meaning was attached to gestures of symbolism and succession. In the days that followed, communication between households became more formal, with exchanges handled almost entirely through staff channels. Joint appearances were quietly reorganized, and coordination between teams became minimal, reflecting a widening gap between the two figures. One senior aide described the atmosphere as the coldest in years, noting that Catherine no longer felt the need to soften tensions as she once did. At the center of this divide is not simple personal dislike, but a deeper struggle over influence, perception, and long-term legacy inside a shrinking royal framework. Sources close to Catherine suggest she believes Camilla should step back from public disputes, especially as William is reportedly less willing to intervene between them. Observers note that what appears as personal tension is also a wider contest over image and historical positioning, with every public appearance now carrying increased meaning. Both sides are said to be aware that perception now plays a major role in shaping authority within the modern monarchy. A new vision for the monarchy is beginning to emerge as William moves closer to the throne, with a clear focus on modernization and structural change. He has reportedly made it clear that reform is not something to avoid, but something to manage carefully and deliberately. In a recent interview during a visit to South Africa, he stated that tradition remains important, but must be reviewed to ensure relevance in the modern era. Reports from royal correspondent Rebecca English of the Daily Mail suggest plans for a smaller monarchy with fewer formal events and reduced ceremonial scale. This includes shorter engagements, less ceremonial display, and a reassessment of long-standing systems such as royal warrants and household structures. The overall direction appears to favor fewer but more impactful public appearances, focusing on substance rather than symbolism. Sources familiar with palace thinking describe William as disciplined and strategic, focused on outcomes rather than sentiment. This approach has reportedly raised concern in some circles close to Camilla, where uncertainty is growing over how influence may shift. He is widely described as firm once decisions are made, with limited expectation of reversal. Earlier discussions also point towards streamlining royal operations and reducing routine ceremonial obligations. Overall, the plan suggests a smaller but more modern monarchy designed to remain relevant in a changing world. Supporters see it as necessary evolution, while others within the institution are watching closely as traditional roles gradually shift. The Andrew crisis exposed more than controversy. It highlighted a deeper shift in how royal authority is being reshaped even before William formally becomes king. What emerged was a leadership style focused on institutional protection over personal loyalty or tradition. Inside palace discussions, it became clear that William's approach is structured, firm, and significantly less flexible than earlier expectations. The turning point reportedly came during internal debates over Prince Andrew's public role, where William pushed for complete removal from official duties. While King Charles was said to favour caution due to personal ties, William's position was more direct and focused on protecting the monarchy's credibility. As discussions expanded to include royal lodge arrangements, internal differences became harder to conceal. Some observers interpreted this as a necessary correction after years of delayed decisions, while others saw it as a quiet but clear shift in internal power dynamics. Either way, it marked a moment where authority appeared to be consolidating under a more decisive and uncompromising direction. The tension didn't just stop with Andrew alone. It was spilling everywhere behind palace walls like a storm that wouldn't calm down. Wider conversations started heating up around Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie too, with insiders saying Prince William was pushing for them to have a much smaller public footprint, while King Charles was reportedly leaning toward keeping them gently visible during select royal appearances, just enough to maintain family unity but not too much spotlight. At the center of all these competing views stood Queen Camilla, and her inner circle was watching everything unfold like a slow-moving power shift happening in real time. People close to the situation suggested these changes weren't random at all, but part of a deeper restructuring of influence inside the palace, slowly reshaping who matters most and who steps back. Commentators like BBC royal expert Jenny Bond and author Robert Jobson pointed out that this signals a stricter, more modern monarchy that has less patience for controversy and more focus on control and image. The comparison many people keep drawing is to Queen Elizabeth II's final years in 2022. But even then, she balanced discipline with calm restraint, something that feels different now in this newer phase. What's emerging instead is a monarchy that feels sharper, more efficient, and less emotionally flexible than before, almost like a system tightening its own structure. William's early leadership decisions didn't just solve a problem, they revealed a whole mindset shift in how the crown might now operate going forward. For supporters, this shift looks like strength, like finally bringing order to long-standing complications that have followed the family for years. But for critics, it feels colder, more distant, like emotional ties are being replaced with pure strategy and timing. Either way, the tone of the future crown is already forming fast and people are noticing it everywhere. And now attention is drifting toward Catherine, Princess of Wales, whose presence is becoming more central behind the scenes than ever before. But how deep does her influence actually go inside this transformation? And what decisions are quietly shaped because of her input that the public never sees? The questions are stacking up fast, and the curiosity around her role is only getting louder every day. Let's dig deeper into this evolving royal structure that's forming piece by piece. Catherine is often described as the stabilizing force in this entire transition, the quiet center holding things steady while major changes unfold around her with intense pressure and scrutiny. Insiders claim she has been present in shaping discussions long before public announcements ever happen, guiding tone and direction in subtle but powerful ways. Observers say she acts like a bridge between old royal tradition and a more modern, relatable monarchy that still carries authority but feels more human and grounded. People often point out her background as part of why she connects so well, describing her as someone who understands ordinary life in a way that helps shape calmer, more balanced decisions inside palace discussions. That perspective is often said to influence how both she and William approach leadership together, focusing on stability, structure, and long-term planning instead of dramatic public displays or unnecessary spectacle. Their goal, according to royal watchers, is to raise their children in a controlled, steady environment that ensures continuity for the monarchy's next generation. Behind palace doors, major preparation work has been quietly unfolding, and it's been happening with precision and urgency that most people never see or hear about. Senior advisors have reportedly been reviewing communication systems, adjusting internal chains of command, and reshaping how official engagements are organized to reflect the new direction. Within those private conversations, one detail stands out sharply, and that is the noticeably reduced involvement of Queen Camilla's wider family in official appearances, signaling a tighter inner structure and more selective representation moving forward. Everything feels more controlled, more deliberate, and more calculated than before. When William appeared publicly in his early role as king, the moment carried a very different energy, less ceremonial and more like a system already, locked into place and functioning smoothly. He and Catherine moved with a quiet coordination that made it seem like every step had already been rehearsed through years of shared understanding and preparation. Catherine stayed slightly behind the spotlight, never overshadowing but never disappearing either, holding a balanced presence that reinforced the idea of leadership as a partnership rather than a single dominant figure. It felt like a joint rhythm, steady and intentional, shaping how the public now sees the monarchy's direction. Her resilience also became a major part of public perception, especially after her cancer diagnosis and treatment, which brought a wave of attention and sympathy from across the public. Her return to duty was seen as calm but powerful, showing strength without loud declarations or dramatic gestures. People close to her often describe her as someone who becomes even more focused under pressure, not withdrawing, but sharpening her attention and clarity during intense moments. That trait has reportedly strengthened her role inside discussions and increased her influence over time in subtle but meaningful ways. Meanwhile, the reduced visibility of Camilla's extended family during key events hasn't gone unnoticed, and observers have interpreted it as part of a wider restructuring of influence inside the royal framework. The balance of who appears, who speaks, and who remains in the background is clearly shifting. In the end, what is forming here is not just a change of leadership, but a redefinition of how the entire monarchy operates on a daily level, with more focus on coordination, discipline, and controlled messaging. Everything feels more streamlined and intentional now. So, what does all of this actually mean for the monarchy's future direction? And how far will these changes go under William's leadership? The questions keep building as the structure continues to evolve in real time. The conversation now turns fully to a new crown under William and what kind of monarchy will emerge as he steps fully into power with Catherine beside him. People are watching closely to see whether this becomes a softer modern monarchy or a stricter, more controlled institution. In the line of succession, William is expected to become King William V, while Prince George moves forward as the direct heir, marking the next generation already being positioned for the future. Catherine is expected to transition into Queen Consort first, and later simply be known publicly as Queen, marking a smooth but significant shift in royal identity. Planning for the coronation is already quietly underway behind palace walls, with focus not only on tradition but also on how the event will be perceived by modern audiences watching from around the world. Everything is being carefully considered, from tone to timing. Instead of massive, heavy pageantry like in the past, there is discussion of a shorter, more accessible ceremony that feels closer to ordinary people while still honoring centuries of tradition. The goal is to keep history intact while making it feel less distant and more relatable. William's leadership style is often described as practical, modern, and steady, with a strong focus on transparency and responsibility rather than silence or strict formality. His approach signals a shift toward a monarchy that communicates more openly and clearly. Traditional events like trooping the colour, with roots stretching back over 2,000 years, are still expected to continue, but likely presented in a refreshed way that feels more contemporary and less rigid. The tradition stays, but the presentation evolves. Questions still remain about how figures connected to the royal family will fit into this new structure, especially those whose roles may be reduced or redefined over time. Everything feels like it's still in motion. The future of titles for Harry and Meghan remains uncertain, with speculation suggesting William may prioritize stability over confrontation, focusing instead on unity and public service messaging. Nothing is confirmed, but the uncertainty keeps attention high. At the same time, Queen Camilla's position within this evolving structure is still being quietly reassessed, especially when balancing past expectations with the future direction of the monarchy. Decisions appear to be ongoing behind closed doors. Across London and beyond, there is growing anticipation about what this new era will actually look like once everything settles into place. People are watching every detail closely. Observers say this moment could redefine how the monarchy is perceived globally, shifting it toward a more modern, structured, and publicly accountable institution while still maintaining royal tradition. The balance is delicate but important. The moment change became undeniable. Silence reportedly fell around Camilla's wider family, not out of confusion, but out of recognition that a new structure was already forming. Everything was shifting faster than expected, but what exactly changed their position inside the palace circle? And how did this new leadership style reshape long-standing relationships built over decades? The answers seem layered and complex. Inside the palace system, the reset of power is already visible, with silence replacing assumption and structure replacing informal influence in many areas. The entire environment feels more controlled now. When the world realized everything had shifted, it wasn't confusion that followed, but awareness that a new order had fully taken shape inside the institution. The change felt permanent. There was no panic among insiders, just recognition that the rules had been rewritten in real time, and everyone had to adjust quickly. The system had evolved. Inside palace operations, decisions that once took weeks are now reportedly being made in hours, showing a faster and more decisive leadership style. Speed has become a defining factor. A senior voice described the atmosphere as respectful but unsentimental, where tradition still exists but no longer guarantees influence or position. That balance has clearly changed. Every list, every protocol, and every arrangement is now measured against one question: Does it serve the monarchy as it exists today? That question drives everything. This shift has changed the tone inside palace conversations, where caution now replaces assumption and every connection is quietly evaluated. The atmosphere feels more strategic. Observers believe this transition is a quiet but powerful redefinition of royal influence, reshaping how decisions are made and how authority flows within the institution. It is happening steadily and silently. For Camilla's extended family, the adjustment is especially difficult, as their position was long built on proximity and familiarity rather than formal authority. That foundation is now shifting, even as routine royal duties continue at Clarence House. Camilla's visible presence at major engagements with the new king has reportedly become less frequent in recent months. The change is noticeable. Inside private discussions where her voice once carried influence, conversations now appear to move forward without her involvement, signaling a shift in internal dynamics. The structure is different now. The shift is not officially framed as conflict, but as recalibration, a way of refining how the monarchy operates under new leadership and expectations. Everything is being reorganized. By early 2026, this new structure had already become routine rather than exception, shaping daily decisions and long-term planning alike. The adjustment is now part of normal operations. What was once assumed to be permanent now depends on usefulness within a modern, evolving crown, forcing older networks to adapt quickly or step back. The monarchy is moving forward. So what do you think about William's first appearance as king, making such a strong impact and reportedly leaving Camilla's extended circle stunned? Share your thoughts below and don't forget to like, comment and subscribe.